To this day, I still subconsciously avoid roads that are too empty, especially after dusk. My wife thinks it's a form of PTSD, and she's right. But I've never told her the whole truth, because some fears, once shared, are given a new host. I don't want her to live in my nightmare, too. This happened about 5 years ago. I was driving back to my home in Arizona from California. My grandfather had passed away, and I had gone to handle some of his estate, which mostly consisted of old furniture and a reasonably sturdy Ford pickup truck. I decided to drive the truck back myself instead of paying for a hauler. It was a long, tedious journey, mostly on Interstate 10, flanked by endless desert and the occasional gas station. To save time and money on a motel, I chose to drive through the night. By the time darkness fell, I had crossed into a notoriously desolate stretch of Arizona. The radio was nothing but static, and my cell service was spotty at best. The car's air conditioning blew out cold, dusty air, and my only companions were the green glow of the dashboard and the unchanging ribbon of asphalt cut open by my headlights. It was around 1 a.m. when a wave of fatigue hit me. I rolled down the window, letting the cold night air rush in to try and stay awake. It was then that I saw the first anomaly on the side of the road. It was a small, handwritten wooden sign with 2 words scrawled on it in white paint: apology box. It was stuck in the sand by the roadside, illuminated for just a second by my headlights before I passed it. I frowned. What the hell was an apology box? We were in the middle of nowhere. Who would put a sign like that out here? My first thought was that it was a prank by some college kids, or maybe some kind of weird modern art. I told myself it was just a strange, random thing, nothing to worry about, and kept driving. About 20 minutes later, I saw another sign. It was an identical wooden plank with the same messy handwriting. It also said, apology box. This time, a distinct chill went through me. My logical mind scrambled for an explanation. Okay, I told myself, maybe it's some kind of religious group. They've set up a series of signs along the highway for some campaign. The explanation felt weak, but on that lonely night, I was willing to believe any reason that would give me peace of mind. But deep down, a voice in my gut was saying, something is wrong. The 2 signs were at least 15 miles apart, and they looked brand new, not like they'd been weathered by the elements. It felt intentional, prepared just for me. I started checking my rearview mirror frequently, but there was nothing behind me but darkness. After another 10 or 15 minutes, the 3rd sign appeared. This time, it was closer to the road, and below the sign, there was actually a box. It was an ordinary shoebox, sealed shut with gray duct tape. The moment I saw it, all of my self-reassurances crumbled. This wasn't a coincidence or a prank. This was a pattern, a trap designed specifically for a lone driver in the dead of night. My heart began to pound, and my palms grew slick with sweat as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't stop. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. Fear gave me a shot of adrenaline. I had to get out of this area as fast as possible, find somewhere with lights and people. I pushed the truck up to 90 miles per hour, the engine groaning in protest. And that's when a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. They were far away, just 2 faint pinpricks of light. But I knew instantly that this was wrong. I had been driving on this road for hours and had barely seen another vehicle. Why, right after I panicked over the apology box and started speeding, would a car show up behind me? I slowed down a little, hoping it would pass me. But it slowed down too, maintaining a perfect, constant distance. It was following me. The realization hit my stomach like a block of ice. I sped up again, and it immediately matched my speed. We were engaged in a silent chase in the pitch-black desert. I stared desperately ahead, hoping to see the neon glow of a gas station or a motel. But there was nothing, only endless night. Suddenly, an obstacle appeared in the middle of the road ahead. It was the silhouette of a person, standing silently in the center of my lane. My mind went blank as I instinctively yanked the wheel. The tires shrieked in protest, and the pickup skidded, nearly losing control. I swerved past the figure. In the brief moment my headlights swept over it, I saw it clearly. It wasn't a real person. It was a mannequin fully dressed, and on its chest hung a sign, written in red paint. "You missed your box." In the split second I was distracted by the mannequin, the car behind me roared to life. It surged forward, pulling up right alongside me. It was an old, dark-colored SUV with windows so heavily tinted I couldn't see inside. It started crowding me, trying to force me off the highway. I could hear the roar of its engine and the sound of its tires kicking up gravel from the shoulder. I was scared out of my mind. This wasn't a robbery. This felt more like a sick, twisted game. They didn't just want to stop me. They seemed to be enjoying the process. I held the steering wheel in a death grip, fighting with all my might to keep the truck on the road. The two vehicles were practically scraping against each other at high speed, the sound of metal on metal setting my teeth on edge. I knew I couldn't let this continue. My pickup was old, but it was heavy. At an upcoming curve in the road, I made a decision. I wrenched the wheel hard, deliberately slamming my truck into the side of the SUV. There was a deafening crunch as the two vehicles collided. Both of us swerved violently. The SUV driver, clearly not expecting me to fight back, lost control. The vehicle wobbled and then veered off the road, plowing into the soft sand and kicking up a massive cloud of dust. I had bought myself a few precious seconds. I floored the accelerator, and the truck shot forward like an arrow. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I just drove. Every second felt like an eternity. I didn't know if they would recover and resume the chase. All I could do was pray. After what felt like a lifetime, but was probably only 10 minutes, I finally saw a light in the distance. A 24-hour gas station. In that moment, its glow looked like the gates of heaven. I swerved into the parking lot, not even bothering to park correctly. I slammed the truck into park, killed the engine, and practically fell out of the driver's side door. I stumbled into the convenience store, where a sleepy young clerk was startled by my pale, terrified appearance. I told him to call the police, my voice trembling with fear. When the officers arrived, I told them the whole story. They sent a car to search the stretch of road I described, but they found nothing. No wooden signs, no shoebox, no mannequin, and no tire tracks from the SUV. Everything had vanished as if it had never been there. One of the older officers looked at me with a sympathetic but clearly disbelieving expression, gently suggesting that maybe I had hallucinated due to driver fatigue. They took my report, but it was obvious nothing would come of it. I couldn't prove a thing. There was a long, deep scratch along the side of my truck, but I had no way of proving it came from another vehicle. I was too afraid to get back on the road. I waited at the gas station until the sun came up before I shakily started the engine again. The last leg of my journey home was made in a state of utter dread. More than a year passed. I had almost convinced myself that maybe it had all been a hyper-realistic nightmare, brought on by extreme exhaustion. Then one day, I was browsing a niche online forum dedicated to cold cases and unsolved crimes when I saw a post. The poster was a trucker. He described a similar experience on a remote highway in Texas. The handwritten signs, the strange slogans, the chase, but his story had an ending that mine did not. He was forced to a stop. He wrote in the post that two men got out of the other vehicle. They looked completely ordinary, even had faint smiles on their faces. They weren't holding any weapons. They simply handed him a shoebox and insisted he take it. Terrified, the trucker complied. Then, the two men got back in their car and drove away, disappearing into the night. In a state of utter confusion, the trucker opened the box. It didn't contain money, drugs, or anything of value. Inside, there was only a small tape recorder and a Polaroid camera. He pressed the play button on the recorder. It emitted the muffled, agonized sobs of a man crying in absolute terror. Then he picked up the camera. The last paragraph of the post read, I pressed the shutter. The camera spit out a photo. As the image slowly developed, I saw a picture of myself standing by my truck, my face a mask of confusion and horror. That's when I realized the apology box wasn't for me. I was a part of the apology box. They don't collect valuables. They collect moments. They collect the sounds and images of people in a state of pure terror. I don't know who they are or why they do it. All I know is that somewhere out there, there's a collection, and a piece of my fear is in it. In that moment, I finally understood what I had escaped. I wasn't crazy, and I hadn't been hallucinating. I had just been lucky enough to not become a part of their collection. I closed the web browser, a bone-deep chill washing over me. I don't know who those people are or what their motives are, and that unknown is far more terrifying than any straightforward act of violence. To this day, I still sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, half convinced I can hear the sound of tires grinding on gravel. And I wonder if, somewhere out there in the desert, there's an empty shoebox prepared just for me, still waiting to be filled. It was a Friday evening, and the deadline for my final paper was looming. I, an ordinary university student, had just graduated and found a remote job at a small company. To save money and experience living alone, I rented an old wooden cabin by a lake in the suburbs. It was cheap, had beautiful scenery, and was a full mile from the nearest neighbor. I loved the tranquility, the feeling of isolation, and thought it was the ideal place to start a new life. I had just moved in, and most of my luggage was still unpacked. I had only tidied up a little. I was sitting in the living room, working on emails on my laptop, enjoying the sunset over the lake outside the window. Suddenly, a dull, forceful thump came from the back of the house, like a heavy object hitting wood. I sharply lifted my head, my heart skipping a beat. The sound was muffled but clear, seemingly from the kitchen or the back storage room. I told myself it might be the wind blowing something, or just the old house settling. I got up and went to the kitchen, turned on the light, and found nothing. All the doors and windows were closed. I even checked the back door. It was securely locked. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but the unease lingered like a thorn in my mind. I returned to the living room, trying to get back to work, but my concentration was broken. About half an hour later, I heard a faint scratching sound, like fabric rubbing against rough wood, coming from the direction of my bedroom. I held my breath, listening intently. The sound was soft but continuous, with an eerie rhythm. I slowly got up and walked to the bedroom door, gently pushing it open. The room was pitch black, the curtains drawn. I turned on the light, and the room was empty. However, my bed sheets, which I remembered being neatly made, were now pulled askew, their edges dangling to the floor. A chill instantly ran down my spine. Unease turned into clear dread. I quickly checked all the doors and windows in the house, making sure they were locked. I even hung keys on the doorknobs so that anyone trying to open them would make noise. As I checked the living room's sliding glass door, I noticed a fresh scratch near the lock. It was thin but deep, as if someone had tried to pry it open with a sharp tool. A cold despair washed over me. Someone was outside, and they had tried to get in, or perhaps had already gotten in. Just then, the lights in the house flickered a few times, and then with a snap, the entire cabin plunged into darkness. I heard a faint hiss, like something being pulled apart, followed by a heavy, slow-dragging sound coming from the darkness, growing closer. I suddenly realized it wasn't the wind, nor was it a mouse. Someone was in the house, and they had cut the power. I tightly gripped the fireplace poker, the only weapon I could find. I held my breath, pressing against the wall, backing towards the basement door that I remembered. That door was heavy, and inside was a toolbox I hadn't yet unpacked. Maybe I could find something to defend myself with. Just as my hand fumbled for the doorknob, a tall figure lunged at me from the darkness. I screamed, a primal, guttural shriek from deep within my throat. I swung the poker with all my might, hitting him hard. I heard a muffled grunt, and the hand gripping me loosened. The poker slipped from my grasp. Without a moment's hesitation, I yanked open the basement door and stumbled down the steps. In the darkness, I fumbled for the basement latch, then threw the bolt with all my strength. I heard an angry roar from above, followed by the violent thud of a heavy object hitting the door. I dared not look back, fumbling in the complete darkness until I bumped into a sturdy metal cabinet. Trembling, I pulled out my phone, but the screen still showed no service. I desperately tried to dial 911 over and over. About 5 minutes later, the banging stopped. A dead silence fell from above. I hugged myself tightly, curled up behind the cabinet, listening to my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. After another long 10 minutes, I heard police sirens in the distance, growing closer. I shot up, rushed to the basement window, and frantically pounded on the glass. The police quickly found the basement window and helped me out. The police entered the cabin. They found a pool of blood in the living room, scattered splinters of wood, and a twisted crowbar. The man lay unconscious in the center of the living room, bleeding from his head. He was arrested. In the subsequent search, the police found a shallow, concealed pit in the woods behind the cabin, not far from the kitchen window. Buried inside was an old military backpack containing some strange items: old clothes, some dry food, and a notebook. The notebook was filled with dense writing, all about me. My schedule, what I did each day, which room I preferred to read in. There was even a crude sketch of me sitting in the living room, unmistakably me. The last page of the notebook had a single line, dated today: "She's here." Tonight. The truth sent shivers down my spine. I had once thought the cabin by the lake was a peaceful sanctuary, an ideal place to start a new life. But now it would forever be shrouded in shadow in my mind. That man, a complete stranger, harbored such twisted malice, observing me and planning everything without my knowledge. I could never again be alone in any quiet place. Whenever night falls, I will always remember those thumps, that cold scratch, and those eyes watching from the darkness. That fear is more real than any ghost, for it comes from the human heart. My sister, Sarah, was always glued to her phone, especially when we were out. Even on our hiking trip to Mount Rainier, she was constantly scrolling. I loved the outdoors, the quiet, the feeling of being totally disconnected, but Sarah couldn't last 5 minutes without checking social media. That's why she brought a portable charger and an extra-long cable, even though the host of our rented cabin had warned us that cell service was spotty at best up there. Our cabin was pretty isolated, tucked away in the dense woods off one of the less-traveled trails. It was an old-school log cabin, the kind with creaky floorboards and a big stone fireplace. Perfect for a peaceful retreat, or so I thought. The first evening was exactly what I'd hoped for: a quiet dinner, some board games, and the sound of crickets outside. Sarah even put her phone down for a bit. It was around 11 p.m. when things started getting weird. We were just finishing up a game of Scrabble when Sarah's phone, which had been sitting face down on the table, suddenly lit up. She picked it up, frowning. "No service," she muttered, "but I just got a notification." It was a message from an unknown number. The text just said, "Look up." We both exchanged confused glances. "Probably just a weird glitch," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. But then her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. A close-up, blurry shot of the cabin's front porch, taken from outside looking in. And in the corner of the photo, just barely visible, was the wooden leg of our Scrabble table, the one we were sitting at. My heart immediately started pounding against my ribs. "Sarah, check the doors," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She was already on her feet, moving toward the front door. We'd locked everything when we came in, or at least I thought we had. She fumbled with the deadbolt. It was locked. The patio door was locked too. The knot in my stomach tightened. We looked at each other, our faces pale in the dim cabin light. Who would even be out here? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. There were no other cabins for miles. Then her phone vibrated again, almost violently. Another message. This one was a short video. It was shaky, clearly filmed in the dark, but it showed the front of our cabin. The camera slowly panned to the right, toward the dense trees, then zoomed in. Through the branches, barely discernible in the shadows, was a figure. Tall, thin, and absolutely motionless, just standing there, facing the cabin. I felt a cold dread spread through me. It wasn't a deer, it wasn't an animal. This was a person who was watching us. And they were sending us videos of it. "We need to call someone," Sarah said, her voice a little louder now, a hint of panic creeping in. "There's no signal. I reminded her, pointing at her phone, which still stubbornly displayed no service at the top of the screen, despite receiving messages. That's when the truly unsettling thought hit me. If there was no service, how were these messages even getting through? Before I could voice it, Sarah's phone buzzed for a third time. This one was an audio file. She hesitated, then hit play. A low, raspy whisper filled the quiet cabin. It was hard to make out at first, just static and a deep, guttural sound. Then clearer came a distorted voice, almost like it was speaking through gritted teeth. "I can see you." We froze. My blood ran cold. The voice sounded unnatural, inhuman almost. It wasn't just a weirdo playing a prank. This felt different, more sinister. "We have to get out of here," I gasped, grabbing my car keys from the hook by the door. Sarah was already pulling on her shoes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the laces. We practically fell out the front door, fumbling with the lock in our haste. The air outside was cold, biting. The forest loomed, a wall of blackness surrounding us. I could feel eyes on us, even if I couldn't see anything. I fumbled with the car remote, hitting the unlock button repeatedly until the headlights finally flashed. As we scrambled into the car, I glanced back at the cabin. The porch light was off. It had been on when we left. And then at the edge of the tree line, just where the video had zoomed in, I saw it. A dark, impossibly tall figure, stark against the slightly less dark backdrop of the trees. It didn't move. It just stood there watching us. I slammed the car into reverse and spun it around, gravel spitting under the tires. Sarah was hyperventilating beside me. We didn't say a word for the entire hour-long drive down the winding mountain road until we hit the main highway. Even then, we just kept going, pushing past small towns until we were far from Mount Rainier. We never contacted the Airbnb host, never filed a police report. What would we even say? That we got texts from a stalker with no cell service? We didn't know who or what was out there. But the scariest part, the thing that still keeps me up at night, isn't just the figure in the woods. It's the fact that Sarah's phone, despite having no signal, still had those messages and that audio file on it. And sometimes, when I hear her phone buzz late at night, I can't help but wonder if that number, that whisper, is somehow still out there waiting.